Grandma Agnes Periwinkle was 70. 70 years young, she'd always say with a cheeky little wink. She baked the most marvellous scones in the entire village, possibly the county. Her lavender shortbread was absolutely legendary. People would queue for it at the church bake sale. But Agnes wasn't just about flour, butter and sugar. Oh no. She possessed a sleek silver tablet, a rather generous gift from her granddaughter, Chloe. And Agnes adored it. She surfed the internet like a seasoned professional. She discovered a whole new, vibrant world online, full of fascinating possibilities. Most people in her village thought she was just a sweet, slightly doddery old dear. They were often quite surprised by her unexpectedly sharp wit and modern outlook on things. Agnes simply loved online forums, especially the ones that catered to mature romantics, as they charmingly called themselves. It was all so terribly exciting. So many interesting, worldly people from all over the globe, sharing their stories and dreams.
Bonjour, Madame Agnes. I am Jean-Luc Dubois, a young millionaire from Paris.
One sunny afternoon, a new message suddenly popped up on her screen. It was from a Jean-Luc Dubois. This Jean-Luc chap claimed to be a rather dashing young millionaire. And from Paris, no less. How terribly sophisticated. He had an impressive profile picture too. A handsome man in a very smart suit, casually leaning against a gleaming red sports car. Agnes's heart did a funny little skip thump. How terribly continental, she thought with a smile. Jean-Luc, it turned out, was the absolute epitome of Gallic charm. He wrote her poems, quite dreadful ones if she was truly honest with herself, full of clichés and slightly off rhymes.
My dearest Agnes, your beauty rivals the stars, your kindness warms my heart. I long to meet you, my sweet angel.
But Agnes, in her romantic haze, thought they were terribly sweet and heartfelt. He sent her breathtaking pictures of his magnificent chateau, nestled somewhere picturesque in the Loire Valley. It looked like something straight out of a classic fairy tale, all turrets and sprawling gardens. Agnes started to feel a delightful, ticklish flutter deep inside, a feeling she hadn't experienced in many, many decades. He seemed to understand her quiet loneliness. He listened, or at least, he typed that he listened very attentively. He made her feel special, unique, and even cherished once more.
My dear Agnes, a terrible thing has happened. I am stranded in Monaco, my wallet stolen. I need just $500 to get back on my feet. Please, my angel, help me.
Then, one fateful Tuesday, disaster apparently struck poor Jean-Luc, or so he dramatically claimed in a rather frantic message. He was on a very important, top-secret business trip. In Monaco, of all glamorous places, he breathlessly explained. And his wallet, containing all his credit cards and a substantial amount of cash, had been cruelly stolen. Such dreadful, rotten luck, he lamented with many typed tears. He was utterly stranded, helpless, and alone. He couldn't even access his supposed millions locked away in Swiss banks. He just needed a tiny, insignificant bit of help, a mere $500, just to tide him over until he could sort things out with his embassy. Agnes felt an immediate surge of profound sympathy. The poor, unfortunate young man. Agnes didn't hesitate for very long at all. Her kind, generous heart simply went out to poor, stranded Jean-Luc. He sounded so desperate, so alone in a foreign land. The very next morning, she put on her best Sunday hat, the one with the jaunty pheasant feather. She trotted down to the local village bank with a determined spring in her step.
An international transfer, Mrs. Periwinkle?
Mr. Henderson, the rather prim bank manager, raised a questioning eyebrow from behind his thick spectacles.
It's for a very dear friend who finds himself in a spot of bother.
She chirped brightly. She wired the $500. It felt rather thrilling, almost like being a character in an exciting spy movie. A few days later, whilst enjoying afternoon tea and her famously fluffy scones, Agnes happened to mention Jean-Luc. She recounted the tale of her charming, sophisticated Parisian friend to her granddaughter Chloe.
A millionaire, Grandma, from Paris, you say? And you met him on an online forum?
Chloe was a complete whiz with computers. She worked in IT for a big company in the city. Chloe's usually cheerful smile faltered, just slightly. Chloe, being the practical and tech-savvy sort, asked if she could possibly see Jean-Luc's online profile. Politely, of course, not wanting to upset her beloved grandmother. As soon as she laid eyes on the photos, her internal alarm bells went from a polite jingle to a deafening clang. A quick reverse image search on the internet told the entire sordid story. the devastatingly handsome Jean-Luc. He was, in fact, a stock photo model from a generic image website, the incredibly grand chateau in the Loire Valley, a popular and rather expensive wedding venue available for public rental. The heart-wrenching sob story about the stolen wallet in Monaco. Chloe had read about these exact scams countless times on cybersecurity blogs. Her heart sank right down to her boots. "Oh, Grandma, what have you done?"
Grandma, I think you've been scammed. This Jean-Luc isn't real. He's a stock photo model, and the chateau is a wedding venue.
Breaking the unfortunate news to Agnes was incredibly tough. Chloe did it as gently as she possibly could, armed with a fresh pot of strong tea and a plate of extra sympathy biscuits. Agnes listened intently, her teacup rattling quite noticeably in its delicate china saucer. Her face, usually so rosy and cheerful, turned a worrying shade of pale, almost translucent. Then, a most peculiar thing happened. The paleness was suddenly replaced by a steely, unfamiliar glint in her bright blue eyes. A flush of deep crimson crept up her neck, spreading to her cheeks. She wasn't just sad or disappointed, she was mad, royally, incandescently, volcanically furious.
That despicable two-faced scoundrel? Right then,
Agnes declared, her voice surprisingly firm and resonant for her age. She slammed her small, surprisingly strong, wrinkled fist down hard on the sturdy oak kitchen table. The little jam tarts Chloe had brought over jumped in surprise.
he thinks he can pull the wool over Agnes Periwinkle's eyes, does he? He seriously believes he can con me out of my hard-earned pension money and simply get away with it, scot-free?
Chloe, ever the pragmatist, started to gently suggest calling the police, reporting the fraud through official channels.
Maybe we should call the police, Grandma. Report the fraud officially.
Police? Too slow, my dear Chloe, and far, far too predictable for a rogue like this. I have a much, much better idea.
Agnes's eyes, usually so soft and kind, now twinkled with a mischievous, almost dangerous light that Chloe hadn't seen in them for many, many years.
If he wants to play at catfishing, then two can play at that particular game. And Agnes Periwinkle plays to win.
Her brilliant, if slightly bonkers plan began to form in her sharp mind. It was audacious. It was certainly a little bit unhinged. But it was also, Chloe had to admit, utterly and completely brilliant. She would create a brand new, utterly irresistible online persona. Someone far too tempting for a greedy, opportunistic scammer to ignore.
I shall be Anastasia Nightingale,
She proclaimed grandly, a woman of immense mystery and even immenser, untraceable wealth. Chloe, initially quite aghast and frankly worried about her grandmother's rather unorthodox scheme, soon found herself completely drawn into the unfolding drama. It was like being in a real-life detective story, she thought, but with significantly more tea and home-baked goods involved. Together, grandmother and granddaughter meticulously built Anastasia. They found evocative photos of an obscure, incredibly regal-looking silent film star from the glamorous 1920s. They carefully invented a tragic, deeply romantic backstory for her. Anastasia Nightingale was the last surviving scion of an ancient, incredibly wealthy and notoriously private European aristocratic family. She was, she would hint, looking for a grand adventure, and perhaps a worthy, dashing young heir for her entirely fictional and quite enormous fortune. Crafting Anastasia's alluring online presence became a true art form for Agnes and Chloe. Anastasia had incredibly refined, expensive tastes. She spoke vaguely yet impressively of hidden offshore accounts, priceless art collections gathering dust in forgotten vaults, and sprawling, secluded estates in exotic locales. She also hinted at a profound, soul-deep loneliness, a desperate yearning for a true kindred spirit, someone young, daring, exciting, and perhaps just a little bit roguish to share her gilded cage. Anastasia, with Chloe's expert technical help navigating the digital world, accidentally stumbled upon Jean-Luc's profile, or rather, the profile of the cunning scammer who had so callously pretended to be Jean-Luc. She sent a carefully worded, deeply enigmatic first message. The intricate trap was meticulously and patiently laid. The scammer, whose real name, they later discovered, was Kevin Higgins from a distinctly less than glamorous bedsit in a rainy, uninspiring town in the Midlands, was hooked. Utterly and completely hooked, like a greedy fish on a particularly juicy worm. Anastasia Nightingale was everything he'd ever dreamed of scamming in his miserable little life. She dangled the irresistible promise of a life of unimaginable luxury, something he could only fantasize about from his cramped room. He quickly forgot all about the persona of Jean-Luc and his previously satisfying, modest $500 scores. Anastasia was clearly the big one, the jackpot. He started pouring his pathetic heart out to her, even complaining bitterly about his difficult clients, and specifically mentioning a silly old woman named Agnes, who'd been surprisingly easy to fool for a few £100.
That daft Agnes woman, huh?
Agnes, reading this from her cozy armchair, just smiled grimly, a predatory glint in her eye. Agnes, playing the role of the enigmatic Anastasia, performed her part to absolute perfection. She was deeply sympathetic to his plight, but also suitably demanding, as a woman of her supposed stature would be. She spoke eloquently of needing absolute, unwavering trust before she could even consider sharing her exclusive world and her entirely non-existent millions with him. She then cleverly devised a test of loyalty for her eager suitor. A grand, public gesture was required. She suggested he do a live stream online. He could share his fascinating life story, his heroic struggles as a misunderstood entrepreneur. Anastasia, naturally, would be watching his every word, his every move. And if she was suitably impressed by his raw honesty and complete openness, a very significant investment in his future ventures could well be forthcoming. Kevin, utterly blinded by avarice, readily and enthusiastically agreed to this proposal. The day of the much-anticipated livestream finally dawned. Kevin, aka Scammer Steve, aka the erstwhile Jean-Luc, was a jangling bundle of raw nerves and giddy excitement. He'd even put on a relatively clean shirt for the occasion, a momentous event in itself. He started his broadcast, a little awkwardly at first, stumbling over his words. Anastasia, who was of course Agnes and Chloe, huddled excitedly around the tablet with a large bowl of popcorn, sent encouraging, flattering messages in the private chat window.
Tell us everything, my brave, misunderstood lion.
Agnes typed, expertly stifling a triumphant giggle. Emboldened by her praise, Kevin launched into his sordid tale. He confessed to all his catfishing schemes, how he targeted vulnerable, lonely people, how he expertly faked multiple identities. He even bragged with a smirk about the easy $500 he'd conned from that daft Agnes woman.
Hello, Kevin. Or perhaps I should call you Jean-Luc. Are you enjoying your little moment in the global spotlight?
That was Agnes's cue. With a decisive click of the mouse, Chloe switched their own webcam on, seamlessly feeding its image directly into Kevin's ongoing live stream. Kevin's jaw dropped so far it nearly hit his cheap desk. His eyes bulged in disbelief and dawning horror. The live chat on his stream went absolutely certifiably wild with comments and emojis. But Agnes, the master puppeteer, wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot.
You see, Kevin, while you were so busy confessing all your nasty little secrets to dear Anastasia, I was also rather busy myself.
She then revealed her truly magnificent masterstroke. She hadn't just catfished him back for her own amusement. She'd also, with Chloe's invaluable technical assistance, been meticulously tracing his digital footprint all along. All their incriminating chats, his tearful live-stream confession, his IP address, and his real personal details had already been compiled into a neat digital package and dispatched to the National Cybercrime Unit in his country. And just for good measure, to a very popular online vigilante show that specialized in publicly exposing just such scammers. Revenge wasn't just sweet, it was digital, public, and wonderfully, gloriously viral.